I'm Serena Halstead.
I'm Spencer Ziegler.
Hi, and I'm Mellisa Smith. Welcome to Data Lit. So as a reminder, we started the Working with Data series with episodes that explore what it means to be data lit. We talked about the types of data educators can encounter in schools, and also about some ways to talk about data. And since data lives within our schools, we promised that we would share the voices of those who interact with data the most. That would be our teachers, our administrators, and our coaches. So in our most recent episodes, we have been talking with district coaches who support our schools, as well as 3 principals at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. And so to that end, today we are pleased to talk with 3 teachers in our district. Welcome, Kevin, Mieya, and Lynzi.
Hello, thank you.
Thanks.
So before we dive in, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves by telling us your name, your school, and the number of years you've been an educator. Mieya, let me start with you.
My name is Mieya Bumpers. I'm recently married, and I will be celebrating 13 years in March in education, and I'm currently at Zebulon Gifted and Talented Magnet School.
All right.
My name is Lynzi Daniel. I am a 6th grade math teacher at Holly Ridge Middle School, and this is my 15th year teaching.
Nice.
Hello, I'm Kevin Ledger. I am an intervention coordinator at Hilburn Academy, and this is my 17th year in teaching and in Wake County.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, guys. Welcome. So when we started this series, let me recap a little bit. In episode 1, we sort of talked about data literacy and what it means. And we defined data literacy as the ability to source, interpret, and communicate data in context. And in that episode, we also discussed how our own data literacy skills evolved over time from both the experiences that we have encountered both in the classroom and out of the classroom. And in another episode, we also discussed the various types of data we encounter in schools. And so my first question to you guys would be, what are some examples of data you analyze as an educator?
Well, something that I analyze, and I've taught elementary and middle, but I always love to learn about my students' learning styles. And I use the Kagan's multiple intelligences because it helps me to build my lesson plans for my students. So that's something I take. And it also includes that social emotional aspect, because now I know some things that might affect them, the way I talk, the way my room is set up. And so I've used that. And of course, we use the benchmarks and essays, but I also like to do the dream box. We currently have a dream box competition going on, Epic. So tracking their minutes, and that is up in the room so all the students can see it. And it's just a constant reminder that you kind of to check yourself, and it makes students more accountable.
Kevin, what about you?
In one of the roles that I serve at Hilburn as the school improvement plan process manager, I'm looking at all kinds of academic data. So the first sets of data that I've been looking at this year were the universal screeners, NKT and MClass for our younger students, STAR Math, and iReady for our older students. We are a K-8 school, so we administer all those assessments. The next source that I rely on heavily is the online access to student information systems, also known as OASIS. I find that that is a powerful way when I want to look at subgroup analysis and looking at maybe some different types of analyses in the Excel spreadsheet. Dreambox, that's a challenge at our school also. And so being able to provide both classrooms and staff feedback on how many students are engaging with at least 5 lessons completed per week, which grade levels are doing best, which individuals have completed the most lessons. And that certainly does create momentum in trying to encourage other students to engage with Dreambox as well. And of course, in the classroom, I do support classrooms. We have formative assessments. And so working with teachers to actually create an assessment and then plan which items we're going to do the item analysis on and see how students are completing or demonstrating mastery on those assessments.
Thanks, Kevin. Lynzi, what about you?
I agree with all of those things. I feel like teachers use data all the time. When I think about on a day-to-day basis, I use cool downs. We use the OUR program in middle school math. So my data now, I've also taught elementary school. And so my data this year in 6th grade math is just a little bit more focused and specialized. Dreambox, of course, we collect data on how many lessons are used. But on a day-to-day basis, I would say I'm using those cool downs to see who got it and who didn't. And then I'm utilizing those pre-tests and my mid-tests and my post-tests. Those are the ones that I look at to really analyze what I need to do next as a teacher.
I just love the diversity of data sources and types that I heard there. There was the typical summative assessment, but also interims, informative. There was academic data, but social emotional data. Multiple learning styles, all those things together. And I think that's wonderful when we're trying to get a sense of what kids can do and how to use that data to improve our instruction. That's wonderful.
I also like that, and I don't know if our panelists recognize it, that they were also talking about some process data. So I heard when they were talking about the completion of the Dreambox lessons or, the number of minutes, some of those process data and trying to understand the outcomes when they get the Dreambox score. I love to hear that there was an interplay of not just looking at the scores, but also some other process data that is happening at their school.
Yeah, that was one of the things I saw about Dreambox. I know it says there's to complete 5 lessons a week. However, what I noticed is my lower students, they can complete 5 lessons. Their lessons are really easy. But I have a student that literally is taking 5th grade math right now, and I teach 4th grade. And he can't run through his lessons. His lessons are a lot longer. So he may not be able to complete 5 lessons, but we have a goal of 50 minutes on Dreambox every week. So that was to make it fair across the board, because I literally watched a student take an hour to complete a Dreambox lesson, and you really don't have an hour in school. So that might just be a suggestion. Yes, the goal is 5 lessons, but we do minutes too.
Well, thank you so much, Mieya. One of the things I heard you mention, which I was just trying to categorize all of the different data types that you said you look at. One of the things you said, Mieya, was Keegan multiple intelligence.
Yes.
And that one, just quickly dawned on me, where do I fit this one in? Because we have the achievement, the process, but do we spend time to look at our students, the way they prefer to learn, put it that way?
Well,
that you mentioned that one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do it in the first week of school usually, because I use it to build my lesson plan. So if I have a lot of visual learners in my lessons, I change and I make sure that a lot of stuff is visual. If I have a lot of kinesthetic learners in a class, I'm going to make sure I have more hands-on. So I know that I'm meeting their basic needs. And I also do the student surveys. How do you like math? How did you learn math? Did your teacher explain it to you? And it just helps me to better reach the students. And that, I think, that will tie into demographics, because now if I came from a lower income school, I might have learned it this way. Or if I come from a school that's K-8, I learned it this way. Or I might have went to a school that only focuses on the new way and not the old way. So it just helps me to understand. And I think that teachers would really glean a lot of information about their students. And it's just that get to know you period. That's that first week of school anyway. You're going over routines, and it helps me to build those relationships with my students as well. So.
Thank you so much for that. So I have a question here for all of you. How has your relationship with data changed as an educator?
Great question. I will tell you, I remember a few years ago, we were at an instructional leadership training meeting in the county. And there was a quote that someone said that was to the effect of, sometimes so much energy goes into accessing and preparing the data that we are often too exhausted to analyze the data, and it becomes a moot point. And that's really what I found my role to be now, is that I'm the person that does a lot of that digging, presenting, and facilitating for our teams to engage in the important part of the data, in my point, which is how do we help the students, right? How's that data going to impact the students? And so if I can support my teams that way by pooling and gathering and presenting data, I find that makes their job just a little bit easier. If I could just give one specific example, in my role as intervention coordinator, I'm looking at a group of young ladies who are receiving math support. And over the past few months, they've been pooled all at the same time, a group of 5. And we just completed our middle of the year STAR math assessment. And 4 of the 5 showed nearly a year's worth of growth according to the grade equivalency, whereas the other only showed about 2 months. And so now we can come to Kid Talk and have a discussion about what's different. Why is this different for this student? And it's also an interesting discussion for the parent conversation as well, because it provides some impetus, some momentum as to why we have to act now and why we have to act urgently to support this student.
Thank you, Kevin. And Lynzi, what about you? How has your relationship with data changed as an educator?
Well, in my last 15 years, obviously, there's been an increase in data collection in the education field. And I remember at first it seemed very overwhelming, very scary, and even almost like private. No one wanted to share. And it was like, oh no, I have 2 kids that are below proficient, and as I've grown to enjoy looking at data and using it as a tool instead of something that makes me feel bad as an educator, now I'm able to use it as a place of reflection where I can reflect on where I am and where I need to go to meet my students where they are, to fill gaps or whatever I need to do in order to make them successful.
Like that. Thank you. And Mieya, what about you?
Well, I was a lateral entry teacher, and I have a degree in accounting. So when I first started, I literally just saw it as numbers like we do in accounting. And then once I understood how to, gauge and read all this data, because I'm in my school in Baltimore, we use profile sheets. We always looked at data and had data talks, a data wall. But now I knew the importance of what was in front of me. And so I still use the same resources. I actually change up to those tests. I still have a class profile sheet. Something that I did start to implement probably about 5 or 6 years ago are student data talks and allowing the students to keep their own data profile sheet. So even though we have it up in the room, it's something that they take home. The parents can see it. It's real time. So it's not just a missing piece. It doesn't just fall by the wayside for them. So they see it all the time. And I've had a lot of success with it, but I also love numbers. So that is a dream thing for me.
I agree, Mieya. I use a student data tracker in my class or in my classes as well. And having so many students this year, which is different in the past for me, having over 100 students, it's nice to know that they are able to take accountability of where they are and talking with their parents at home. They're able to bring that piece home and have a conversation about where they are in the unit, and just having that visual for them, I think is great.
It is great. I'm hearing so many really tangible, practical approaches that y'all have, facilitating it for your teachers, data trackers, class profile sheets, data talks, all those. So I'm curious to kind of drill down and learn just, all right, what strategies are y'all using when you're analyzing student learning data?
It depends on the data I'm looking at. Like, for example, STAR Math. I'm meeting students where they are. I'm not saying, hey, you need to be on 4th grade level when you're done, but the goal is for them to grow by 1 year. If you're on M class, I'm looking for you to be green by the end of the year, not yellow or red. If you are on check-ins, I'm looking for you to make at least a 60% on each check-in. So there's a specific goal for each piece. So it's kind of hard to say. So I actually make those notes for the students on the in-class data trackers so they know, look, it's all over the place. This is looking at this. This is looking at that. And they are understanding that this data is all saying something different. STAR Math gives you a grade level. M-Class gives you a number for all these different parts. NC check-ins just tackles these standards. And so we have many assessments on SchoolNet. There are 5 questions, standards mastery, and they get to see, am I red, a yellow, a green, or blue? And then that gauges, hey, if I take the EOGs, I'm probably going to be here. So it's just helping the students to understand what that part or what that specific piece of data means, because it's no way to just come and look at data in one way at all. And I think that's trouble that most people face, because that's how I began to look at data at first, just one way, until it was explained to me. And I was like, oh, got it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. I like that strategy to focus on what the assessment aims to do, because of the data from a formative assessment while the instruction is still going on shouldn't be interpreted the same way as data from a summative assessment when the instructional unit is done. That's a great strategy. Lynzi, what about you?
Sure. As a teacher, I use a color-coded spreadsheet for myself so I can track my individual student data throughout a unit. I like to see the red, green, and the yellow just at a quick little, a quick visual for me, so I can know who I can pull my group, since I only have the kids for an hour and then they're gone. I want to be able to be efficient with my analyzation there. And for the students, I use a data wall in my classroom as well. And I like for them to be able to be a part of the celebration piece. So when they have mastered a specific standard, they go up on my data wall and they get to be a part of that. And we also track data as a class, and we use our class average in math per unit so that we can celebrate growth. And that has just led to wonderful conversations throughout this first half of the year, where my students want to do well and they want everyone else around them to do well, because we're all working together to meet a classroom goal. And that's just been kind of neat to see. These kids are older, they have the technology and the, time after school where they might have a homework buddy and they recognize, hey, this guy needs help. Let's do our homework together. And that piece has been really cool this year to watch grow.
I love how you're using data in an empowering way. And also just as a teacher, using it efficiently. We talked about in a previous episode that just the understandable lack of time is the biggest barrier preventing teachers. So just someone with that quick color coding, I think that's a great practical strategy. How about you, Kevin?
Sure. I think we can all agree here that I think many of us are number lovers. We enjoy that. And we enjoy the color-coded graphs. And I'm no different. And I also contend that possibly that's true for our students as well. And so when meeting with individual students, I like to present what I call dynamic graphs. I like a graph where I can show them, here's where you were, here's where you are now, here's where we'd like to get you to. And if I can set up as a series of slides and just toggle through the slides, and it's almost like it becomes a visual where they can see like, oh, I can see my progression. Then you see that spark, and maybe there's a little bit of excitement about the meaning or the impact this data can have. And same with the teachers also. I think with the school improvement team, I do the same thing. We're looking at the school-wide data. And so having this colored graphs that we can kind of go through the slides and see the progression over time, I think is a neat aspect. There's another one that I'm really a big fan of, and it does require extra work because I don't have an efficient way of doing it, which, as you mentioned, Spencer, efficiency is always a concern, but it's the peer gap analysis. And so, what I find is so powerful in this is that when we have conversations about students who are struggling, this student's not doing well in my class, but he's doing well in other classes, or why is this the only grade the student's doing well, the only class the student's doing well in? And what I've been able to do for my teams is bring data that shows, well, if I look at the breakdown in terms of demographics, so if I look at the males, how are males doing in this particular ELA class? And I see that actually this male is quite comparable to his peers. And then let's say if I look at my African-American males in that class, and I realize maybe there's a small sample there, maybe only 8 or 9 students, but he's actually the second highest, and there's 8 or 9. So when I start putting these pieces together, and when we do box and whisker plots, and we can see where that student fits in each one of these peer groups, it promotes interesting discussions. I'm a fan of the TIPS process. Let's throw out all the hypotheses. Why is this? Why is the student now a concern for people? What can we do to help the student in other classrooms? And like I said, I mean, that takes more time, but you see the visual of like, here's the student, this demographic versus this demographic, and so on. I think that can be powerful to engage.
Kevin, I agree with that. I think it's important because what happens is now you get to see other teachers' strengths and weaknesses. And sometimes it's all in the style in which the teacher is teaching. And so we used to fishbowl into different classes. That way you can see the strategies that teacher may be using to teach Jonathan that day, because you are not sure how to interact with him. Oftentimes that's the issue or the barrier with most of our classrooms. And so I like the idea that you're having that data talk with those teachers, that it's not just the numbers on the paper, it's the physical body sitting in front of you. And you're including ISIL, the instruction, the curriculum, the environment, when you're talking about all those things. So I love your strategy.
Yeah, thank you all for that. I feel like in each one, I was really impressed just that how y'all are using data to start, not end conversations. That's not about you're using inquisitive language, not definitive language. Sitting down and with a student or a teacher, figuring out where do we go from here? What do you notice? What do we wonder? I think that's really powerful.
So I also noticed in your conversations that each of you sort of hinted ways that you seem to already be engaging students and parents with using data. So I think I heard either one or two of you talked about the Kid Talk. I think I heard you all talk about interactive graphs, getting the students involved, making sure that they understand their own data. So can you speak to me a little bit more about how do you all engage students and parents with their data?
I think it's really important to celebrate with the children and making sure that they know we're all here for the same reason. We want them to be successful and we want to celebrate growth no matter how small or how large. So celebrating classroom growth is great, as well as celebrating individual student data, whether that be with a piece of candy or whether that be with a positive note home, or, teachers are so creative in the way a sticker, just all the things that kids love. But most importantly, having them understand that the data isn't just about the numbers, that it's about them being successful and making growth.
Something I do at the beginning, not the school year, but of the new year. So when we came back from break, we started this, we're in a growth mindset, having a growth mindset. And one of the activities they had to do was take a pennant home and design it with their parents with an academic goal for them. So now the parents and the students are now engaging in setting this goal. And then we had that talk. Well, this is where you are, and this is how you make it to your goal. So now everybody's really excited. And today we actually had a pizza party because one of our goals was to just be able to write a short research paper in a realistic fiction. And to see fourth graders do that and edit and be able to, use the vocabulary was very important. But giving them that rubric, they were able to do that. So we had a pizza party. And as Lynzi said, just celebrating them, but also engaging the parents. And so I shouted out, I sent the message out, telling the parents, hey, the children did a great job. Our work is showcased in the hallway. Come and see it. We had a pizza party because they did such a great job. Parents are like, oh, I love this. This is great. So
I've got to agree with all these. Now more than ever, we need to celebrate success. And, whether it be the posters and the charts that we post in the lobby, used to be parents could come and see that, but they can still see through the doors, those kinds of things. Or on social media, of course, tweeting out that picture with the school mascot or with the school principal with a child or two. That can be powerful to reaching the community and celebrating those successes.
Yeah, I love that through line of just celebration with data. Sometimes when data is misused, it can be something that is a hindrance that can affect people's sense of kind of identity, can detract from their willingness to engage with the material. So each of you using data in a celebratory way is just wonderful. All right, so the last thing we want to ask you is just thinking of, we've really loved this conversation about just data literacy skills. Just thinking about if there's a new teacher coming in, what are some data literacy skills that you would recommend to that new teacher?
My first recommendation would be to start small. Pick one thing. Don't try and do it all. I know elementary teachers, I heard you say, Mieya, there are so many things that you are tracking. And then, upper grades have so many kids. So if you're just doing this new, starting small, picking one thing to track and being super consistent with yourself in what you choose to track and also with the kids.
And I'm going to piggyback on you with you, Lynzi, and I'm going to say the only thing I would add is it's okay to use a graphic organizer or a paper, a book. No one is expecting you to memorize that. In your first year, you're just really trying to learn to float. So just, try to just learn to understand what the data does. Even if you don't know what to do with it yet, just understanding what is this test for, what does it show me, kind of having a knowledge base about that.
I agree. The first thing I say is don't be afraid to limit your access to one table or one graph. Pick that one data set. As a new teacher, it's so overwhelming, of course. And so try to find that one piece of data that's going to give you the most leverage to improve student outcomes. And that can come from conversations with your department, with your colleagues, mentor, things like that. Asking, encouraging a willingness to engage in data protocols. I think that this is one of the strengths when you have a team that can organize that protocol and stick to the rules of it, if you will. That can promote positive and fruitful discussions. The other thing I would say is that ultimately I come back to it. Maybe knowing that person who can help you also, whether it be analyze, whether it be pull the data source, or get to that next step in the process. If we're doing the BOI, do we have an MOI? Do we have an EOI? If we're doing one assessment, how's that going to align with what I see in my classroom? And just providing those insights for that first year teacher.
And I guess I have one other thing. I know we talked about celebration, but I know as a new teacher, the data does feel so overwhelming, but just don't forget why you're tracking that data and celebrate with the kids. Like make them feel empowered with their data. And I mean, we're here for the students and just making sure that they feel successful.
And I would say that's being realistic to themselves. You're human and it's okay to be a person and you're not going to learn everything the first year.
I wish I knew all three of you when I started teaching.
Yeah, I need a time machine. That would have been really helpful.
Yes. I mean, I'm just listening to, you, Lynzi, you mentioned just taking the time to get to know the data. Mieya, you said something very important, that each of the data has different meanings to it. And sometimes just sitting down and mastering even one at a time, that's really good. And Kevin, I wish someone had told me, you can't understand it all, reach out to the experts. And I'm thinking the expert, not just within your school, but even in the central office, we have coaches, specific persons that deal with different types of data. So I'm really glad that you share those ideas with us.
It was indeed our pleasure for us to have these three teachers share their expertise with us. And so as we come to a close, I want to thank Cary High School student Logan Foster for our theme music. If you have any questions, comments, or notes for us, please send us a message through our website, www.wcpss.net/datalit. And maybe we can take some of those questions for our upcoming series or in our new season. So for all of us, goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Please keep up the good work, folks.
Thanks.
Bye.